Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 145 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening here in the beginning of February. We're getting really close to baseball, and I'm joined, as I always am, by my friend Scott Coleman. Scott, we have a guest on today's show. That's fun. What's going on?
Hey, Brad. We do have a guest on the show, and Kyle Glaser, who has done a lot of things in the baseball industry, but most recently has covered the San Diego Padres, is going to be on the show here in a little bit to talk Jurickson Profar, also hit on the ever-popular Dylan Cease and Michael King trade rumors and a few other things as well. But, I'm doing well, man. It's February is officially baseball season beginning. Pitchers and catchers for the Braves show up in 10 days or so. Players, the full workout is about a week after that. And then I think we're like 24 days away from the first spring training game. So the light is at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully in the next couple of days, the Braves have a little more activity left in them.
Yeah, to be sure. As of this recording on Sunday evening, it's still been relatively quiet since the Jurickson Profar explosion in the dead of night. Basically, the Braves finally doing something. But yeah, we got into that with Kyle. Kyle does set just as a spoiler alert, Kyle does set a very large asking price for Dylan Cease. So Braves fans probably won't love that. Spoiler alert, as we'll get into that later. We already talked to Kyle, so we can tell you that ahead of time. But doesn't mean it's not possible. It's just that he might have poured a little bit of cold water, a tad bit, on that pursuit. But before we turn it over to Kyle and that conversation focused on Profar and those pitchers, a tiny bit of news, not really news, but some guys that we've talked about between you and I, Steven and Sean, 4 free agents that the Braves were either linked to directly or at least were logical for the Braves to pursue along the way, have signed within the last 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, something like that. In no particular order, Ha-Seong Kim off the board, the one shortstop we talked about, sans Willy Adames for months, Max Scherzer, Carlos Estevez out of the bullpen is off the market, and also Ryan Stanek, who we talked about briefly at the end of last week. Any of these strike you as particularly noteworthy? I think the Kim one's kind of like hey, it's Arcia time. Other than that, what do you make of these guys flying off the board in relative speed?
Yeah, I was really hoping at the start of the offseason that the Braves were going to be able to address shortstop and maybe find a long-term solution at the position. Clearly, that is not going to happen. I don't blame them for not throwing a big old bag of money at Willy Adames months ago. And for Ha-Seong Kim, I think it's a great fit for Kim for Tampa Bay as well. But, Alex Anthopoulos, he's never done an opt-out before. And Kim got one of those with Tampa Bay. That complicated it. And because that Ha-Seong Kim is coming off shoulder surgery, it's a lot of uncertainty for this upcoming year. And it was just tough to kind of make that piece fit. And then, we talked about Max Scherzer a couple times. One, I can't believe Toronto gave him $15.5 million at his age, and given what Max Scherzer has been the last couple of years. But I don't know, Brad. Am I crazy there? If the Braves would have come even close to that number for a Max Scherzer, what would have your thought been?
My first thought is they wouldn't have. I don't think. Yeah. My second thought was I can't remember what I said on the show, but I think I might have said $6 million for Max Scherzer. Would have been all right, I like that. If they had gone to 10, I would have maybe understood it. 15 plus is a lot of money for Max Scherzer. And look, I was dead wrong. Occasionally I'm dead wrong, but I thought what he had to do, the workout to show teams that his market was going to be pretty light. And that was my basis for that conversation in a lot of ways, was hey, if you're in late January having to do a workout, you don't really have teams lining up for you. But apparently I was just wrong, and he had $15 million waiting for him. So, good on Max Scherzer for doing that. But yeah, if the Braves had done that, I probably would have at least said out loud, hey, it's a 1-year contract and there's no risk to 1-year contracts. It's not my money. I would have made that point almost certainly, but it's a lot of money for Max Scherzer. When you assume that, as we do, I think the Braves have some sort of operating payroll structure, you have to live within that. If you're Alex, and using that much money on Scherzer would have been a bad idea, I think, probably in the grand scheme of things. Estevez too, that's a reasonable deal for him. He got 2 for $22 from the Royals. He was a guy that neither one of us was super excited about, a good reliever, but not a game changer. He was in the second or third tier relievers, and that's a fine contract to not give out if you're the Braves. I don't know. Ryan Stanek is boring. There was a direct connection there because Bowman reported on the Braves liking him, but 1 year, $4.5 million. Okay, just that's a guy that signed a regular contract for a reliever. So none of these are huge news. I think the Kim one's really interesting in that he had an opt-out, which Alex is like not going to do. I don't think Alex has never given up an opt-out that I'm aware of. So that was probably maybe where the line was drawn. But look, Scott, I know you're not going to like this. I've been operating for about 2.5 months now that Orlando Arcia was going to be a shortstop on opening day. And I would have been very surprised if he wasn't, like, probably pleasantly surprised. But I think the Braves are just like operating in this mode where if he is the only weakness in the lineup, they're okay with it. That's kind of what I think Alex believes and what they're kind of doing with their actions.
I have mentally been preparing for Orlando to be the shortstop for about 2 months now. Sure, you hold out a little bit of hope. If Ha-Seong Kim would have come to Atlanta, I would have been all for it. But it seems like we will now have to just cross our fingers and say a prayer that Orlando is just somewhat better than last season when just on the whole, the numbers were bad. And then, of course, the struggles with runners in scoring position are almost legendary at this point. But on the whole, this should be a much better and more healthy lineup in 25. And let's hope that Orlando is not being asked to do a lot, because it was not that long ago that he was batting like 5th in the order out of just pure necessity because he had strung together just a couple of good games.
Yeah, hopefully that won't be happening again. Hopefully the lineup will not fall apart health-wise, etc. And look, we're getting very close to spring training. You led with that, and it's right. We're a week and a half away for pitchers and catchers. It's a reminder that not all business is done when pitchers and catchers report. There will almost certainly be some not high-end, but like middle-tier free agents that are not signed by February 12th. They don't have to sign by then. And there's still some pretty interesting names available, a lot of whom do not really have ties to the Braves. Like, for instance, Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso are not like natural Braves targets. So we haven't talked about them really at all this winter, but they're still available and looking for a lot of money at this point in February. Jack Flaherty is the big pitching arm that's still available. There are guys. There are starting pitchers that are available still. I think our collective guy, Andrew Heaney, is someone that we've been talking about for a while on this show. That's one name. You got relievers. Kenley Jansen, he of Curacao, just as a throw that out there for no particular reason now that Profar's on the team and an old friend. I don't know. There's still some names out there. We'll see if the Braves do anything, but they don't have to do anything before the 12th. I think that's just something that we have to keep in mind, even if it would be great for us to have some more content in the next 10 days. That's not like a deadline to sign somebody.
Yeah, I think probably by the end of February, then I almost worry about the player not having enough of a spring training to hit the ground running. And it's interesting that a couple of times now, Alex has said in interviews that some of the negotiations for free agents and even trades might go into the spring. So we'll see where that all shakes out. The remaining free agents, obviously Bregman and Alonso are not fits. If the Braves have the money for a 1-year deal with Jack Flaherty, then okay.
Sure. Pillow contract, maybe. If he has no market at all, that would be a nice landing spot. If you just wanted to, all right, bank some money, be on a contending team, that's a big thing, and have a rotation spot locked in for him, which he would have, obviously, if he signed. I doubt it, but hey, sign me up.
Yeah. So sure, those guys, Andrew Heaney, we've talked about. Nick Pivetta, if he did not have the qualifying offer,
yep,
would be much more interesting. And then there's some boring starters like Jose Quintana, Kyle Gibson. I could maybe see one of those type of arms coming to Atlanta for cheap on a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
We're not going to do a pre-game podcast super hyped for a Jose Quintana start, but
Disagree, Scott. I'm very excited. I'm kidding.
He wasn't too bad with the Mets, and
no.
Kind of that very boring back end starter type. And then maybe the one reliever who is still out there, who I am really interested in, is David Robertson. Robertson is 40 years old and somehow just really, really good still in the bullpen. And you want to talk about someone who can replace Joe Jimenez in that 8th inning role. Robertson has the stuff. He's about as proven as it gets because he's been in the league for 15, 20 years now at this point. So I think if there's one free agent who I would be really excited for that seems reasonable of this bunch, David Robertson would probably be that guy for the Braves.
Yeah, he's really good. It's just the age, but that also might help you if you're the Braves to not have to give him a multi-year contract. You get a 1-year deal for him. That makes a ton of sense. He'd probably help them quite a bit. The pitchers will all help. All joking aside about Quintana or Gibson, they are better than the Bryce Elder tier of guy. That's the baseline. It's not sexy. We will not have the same level of vigor that we did about Profar. If they were to sign Kyle Gibson tomorrow, we'll do a show immediately, but it won't be quite as hyped as that show was. But it will. I at least would say this makes the better. And he's a fifth starter probably, but hey, fifth starter that's reliable is not a small thing to have in your arsenal. So it's not sexy, but certainly there are names that are still available, and we'll have more on that, of course, as we get closer, because we don't ever stop talking about the Braves. It's going to happen throughout this podcast and later on, and Sean and Steve will be back, and we'll do more shows, and we're getting closer, man. That's the thing. Yeah. Once it becomes February, it's like, oh, we're kind of here. We talked to Kyle already. Let's come up in a second, but I'm just jacked up for baseball. It gets that time. Like, we're pre-Super Bowl still, but this is the dead week where there's no football, and it's like, oh, by the way, we're coming down. People are making plans to drive. I saw the Braves put out like their equipment guys packing stuff up on the trucks and stuff like that. It's like, all right, we've arrived.
Yeah, spring training, it's a funny thing. Everybody gets so hyped to see Ronald Acuna and Matt Olson and Chris Sale and all the boys walk up and show up for workouts, and then the video clips of batting practice and PFP and all that good stuff. And then there's also like the realization that there's like 7 weeks of workouts and games that mean nothing. And it's a bit of a slog at times in the spring, but you are absolutely right. It's exciting as we get closer and closer here. And before we know it, the Braves will be opening up the season in San Diego.
We're getting very, very close. All right, Scott, we're taking a quick break to hear from our sponsors. And on the other side of this break, you'll be hearing from not only us, but mostly from Kyle Glaser. We'll be there too, but just stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back with Kyle.
Hey, Valentine's Day is coming up, and we have the recommendation for you to check out right now. Don't wait. It's 1-800-Flowers.com. This year, we're partnering with 1-800-Flowers to make sure you're a Valentine's legend with an exclusive offer for the FT fam. It's double the roses for free. When you buy 1 dozen, they're going to double your bouquet to 2 dozen roses. It's the perfect way to wow her without breaking the bank. 1-800-Flowers always delivers. Let them dominate this holiday. It's what they do best.
Think about everyone in your fam that deserves some love on Valentine's Day. I sent a bouquet to my daughter at college, and it lit up her day. I also added an awesome vase to the order for her, so she's got it all.
All roses from 1-800-Flowers are picked at their peak, cared for every step of the way, and shipped fresh to ensure lasting beauty. Don't wait. Think ahead this year. Make it easy and get that deal right now. When you order 1 dozen, they'll double the rose bouquet for free. That's the FT deals that we're always looking out for. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/FT. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/FT.
We are joined now by the host of the brand new Friar Territory show on this Foul Territory Network. His name is Kyle Glaser. How are you, sir? Welcome to the podcast.
Well, yeah, thank you, guys. Glad to be on with you.
It is our pleasure. We are aiming the highest possible of people who cover the San Diego Padres on a regular basis for this podcast. People cannot get enough of Jurickson Profar talk, Kyle, because the Braves are really quiet for a very, very, very long time this winter, and we were all just itching for stuff. And finally, out of the goodness of everyone involved, something happened, and Jurickson Profar arrived in Atlanta. Obviously, we'll start here. You covered him. You know him more than we do. What did you make of his breakout last year? I guess probably even on the field. He had this great 24-24 season that led to this interest. I know the Braves believe it's real. How real is it? What have you seen from him on the field in the last 12 months?
Yeah, well, he's always been very, very comfortable in San Diego. It's kind of interesting looking historically. The player he's been with the Padres compared to other teams, it's 2 completely different players. Even his first stint with the Padres, even though the numbers weren't as, exciting, they didn't jump off the page as much as what he did last year, he was still a really good player who did a lot of the X factor things that maybe don't show up in the box score. He would, make a great slide at the plate to turn it out into a run. He would throw a guy out, from the outfield to stifle a rally and, kind of swing the momentum back the Padres' way. He was always a very loose, energetic, high energy kind of player that would do some exciting things. He'd also do some boneheaded things. But even though the numbers didn't jump off the page his first time around in San Diego, it was very clear that he was really starting to find himself. He was starting to be a productive player. He left, didn't go well in Colorado, came back. And again, he just was a great addition to the clubhouse in terms of just the clubhouse dynamics. He gave the Padres what they really needed. And we really saw him kind of blossom as a leader last year. One of the things that people I think forget is the Padres, things could have gone south very quickly for them in the first half last year. They lost Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish, and Fernando Tatis Jr. to injuries. Xander Bogaerts got hurt. Manny Machado got off to the slowest start of his career. Ha-Seong Kim took a big step back. The first half could have gone really, really poorly. We saw Jurickson Profar and Jackson Merrill really be the two players that kept the Padres afloat the first half. And then when everyone came back and got healthy in the second half, Machado found his gear, Tatis got healthy, Bogaerts, Darvish, Musgrove, etc. That's when they really took off. So I think the tone was really set during an early season series against the Braves when he and Will Smith were jawing at each other, and there was a little benches clearing incident. Will Smith said he's not really relevant in the post game that night. The next game, Profar went out and hit a bases clearing double to win the game for the Padres. We just saw a little bit of ability to come up in big spots, put the team on his back, and carry them. That was a real growth we saw from him last year.
And Kyle, I know we have talked about on the show a couple episodes now. Again, it's been a very quiet winter about Profar's turnaround offensively. Yeah. And you mentioned that maybe pre-2024, he was a player who had to kind of do maybe the small things to really stand out on the field. But you've been covering him for a while. Last year's offensive outbreak, I mean, what was it that really stood out to you with his game offensively and just some of the changes he made in order to become one of the better outfielders in the National League last year?
I think a lot of it was really getting with the right hitting coach. Victor Rodriguez came over to join the Padres, and the entire offense, you saw a lot more contact, a lot better approaches. And look, the more hard contact you make, the better your performance is going to be. It wasn't just Profar. The entire Padres offense really jumped forward last year. So I think a lot of it was just good instruction, getting with the right coaches, and being in a place he was comfortable. Again, Jurickson Profar in San Diego has been a very different player than Jurickson Profar pretty much everywhere else in his career, which is why I thought this free agency was going to be really interesting to see how other teams valued him given that. And I'm going to be very curious to see just how he does in Atlanta because, again, Jurickson Profar, I think he's a really good player and a tremendous clubhouse presence, which we can get into. I'm inclined to believe he'll still perform well in Atlanta. I think it's hard to say he'll replicate the levels he reached last year just because it was so far beyond his career norms. But he's a good player. Again, got the right teammates, the right place, the right coaches, and we just saw him really take off. It was kind of everything came together, situationally perfect. He also stayed healthy, which is something that he hadn't done a lot in his career as well. So I think it was just a combination of things all coming together at once at the right time.
I was going to ask him, you mentioned the comfort level. He seems to be fairly eager to come to Atlanta and a little bit more than the typical free agent. Everyone says that whenever they sign, they're going to be excited to go there, right, in public. But there's the Curacao connection. There was some stuff in the past that he maybe was interested in Atlanta at times. Is he someone that you think that kind of has to be really comfortable where they are for him to succeed? You don't want to obviously overanalyze it too much, but given that, like you said, he's been a different player when he's been comfortable. Is there anything that would give you pause about him not being in San Diego? Like, can he do, not necessarily like you said, like not like last year's performance probably, but a better version of pre-2024 Profar, perhaps?
I think it's just, it's hard because he's never really done it outside of San Diego. Even go back to, his first stint with the Padres, even that was better than mostly anything he'd done in his career with Oakland, with Texas, et cetera, and what he did afterward with Colorado. So just because we haven't seen him really do it anywhere outside of San Diego, it is a little bit of a mystery. Again, I'm inclined to believe he's going to be a good, productive player for the Braves just because I think he really kind of found himself last year where everything clicked. He's going to another organization that, is a first-class organization all the way around that has, good coaches and he doesn't have to be the guy. He's surrounded by a lot of other really good players. So there are a lot of similarities to the situation in San Diego, which I think will certainly benefit him. I'm just going to be fascinated to see because again, Jurickson Profar with the San Diego Padres has been a very different player than Jurickson Profar anywhere else in his career.
So I have an interesting question, Kyle. So if you were maybe AJ Preller's top lieutenant, and of course he signed for 3 years and $42 million with Atlanta. If you were running the Padres or any organization, based on what you've seen, would you be comfortable giving him a 3-year commitment at this point?
Absolutely, especially for the Padres, his value to them was massive. If the Padres had the budget room to do so, they would have signed him. They wanted to bring him back. They understand his value. Just the situations around with ownership and where their luxury tax is, they don't have the room to do really a whole lot of anything, which we're seeing right now. So, but yeah, he's been around for a while, so I think people think he's way older than he actually is. He's 31. I don't think he turned 32 yet. If he did, it's fairly recent. I mean, he came up so young, with the Rangers. He just crossed the 10-year, service time mark, but he's still got a few prime years left. And again, he's a type of player who, has some athleticism, plays, fast, high energy type of player. He's not a guy who all of a sudden is just going to slow down and kind of just drag a team down once he hits 33, 34. I think he's still got a few productive years left.
And then something else we've heard about Profar, and you alluded to it a little bit, but just that he's well regarded in the clubhouse and kind of the work he does off the field. So anything, you can share seeing him firsthand up close, who is Jurickson Profar, both the player and the guy in the clubhouse?
Yeah, the biggest thing with Jurickson Profar is, he plays loose, high energy, has a smile on his face every day, no matter what, on the field in the clubhouse. And that was something the Padres needed. One of the biggest issues facing the Padres is they had a lot of guys who would really ride the emotional wave. And when things were going great, they were happy, they were doing, well, everything was hunky-dory. But as soon as things started to go badly, they would kind of clam up. It would get kind of dour, just be a little bit of a dead man walking feeling. We saw that in 2023 when they had this loaded team on paper and there were a lot of games. They were sleepwalking through games. Jurickson Profar is the kind of guy, he was the perfect addition to the Padres, inject some energy, inject some life, and just keep it loose and free flowing and steady, whether you're on a 7-game win streak or a 7-game losing streak. There's a lot of value there. I actually think that him going to the Braves will be helpful for a guy like Ronald Acuna Jr., who we've seen is, again, like some guys in the Padres, tremendously talented. At times, his effort level, his focus aren't where they always need to be. He can certainly pout a little bit. Jurickson Profar is the kind of guy that goes in, keeps everyone loose, and helps players like that, have fun every day and keep it light. We saw him do that with Manny Machado. We saw him do that with Fernando Tatis, and it made a big difference. I think that losing that clubhouse dynamic that he brought is going to really hurt the Padres every bit as much as what he did on the field.
So we could talk about Jurickson Profar all day long, and feel free to add more if you want to, Kyle, on that. But while we have you, we do have to, I think contractually, we should ask you about a couple of the pitchers that have been in the news from the Padres. Dylan Cease, probably the biggest name. As we were talking before we started recording this, Scott even brought this up in this way. It seems like Braves fans have already kind of fitted Dylan Cease for a jersey at this point over the last couple of weeks. It's not actually gotten to that point, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe you have something different there, but what's your read on the kind of rumblings there? It doesn't always, kind of candidly to me, doesn't make a ton of sense because the Padres are still pretty good. And both Dylan Cease and Michael King, by the way, who was kind of in the same conversation, are quite good and might be valuable to a playoff level team like San Diego too, but maybe they're available. What do you think of this?
You have to understand AJ Preller is the type of GM who will talk about anybody and everybody at all times. He's the kind of guy that will, go out with these crazy trade ideas and bring it to other GMs and they'll talk through things. And, 99% of the time, nothing comes of it. The trades you hear about are actually a very small percentage. The trades that come together, I should say, are a very small percentage of the trades that are actually talked about. So this is very much, the MO for the Padres. Hey, we'll talk about anyone and everyone. In terms of why they're doing it, it really just comes down to the fact the Padres have a lot of holes on their current roster. They still have a lot of really good players. The top 6 in their order is great. The top 3 in their rotation is great, but they don't have much at the bottom third of the order. The back of the rotation is a question mark. The bench is not very good, and there's really no organizational depth because they traded away so many prospects. So where this is coming from is the Padres have a lot of holes. They don't really have the budget room to address those holes. So the first place they're going to go is, okay, let's look at the guys who are making some money that are going to be free agents after this year and maybe see if that makes sense to trade one of them. That's Michael King, that's Dylan Cease, that's Luis Arias. All these are standout players the Padres want to keep, but this is in some ways the only way they can address their roster holes given their current, financial situation. So that's why these conversations are happening. I will say it will take a lot for the Padres to part with Dylan Cease. One of those trades where if you put on Braves Twitter and say, this is what it'll take, Braves would say, oh, no, we're not doing that. We're not giving up this guy. You're going to have to give up at least one, probably two guys you don't want to give up for the Padres to part with him. So again, AJ Preller is always active. He's always making trades, through spring training, before the start of the season. We'll see, but it would take a lot. It would have to be the right deal. And any team acquiring, whether it's Cease or King, you'd have to give up probably two guys you don't actually want to give up.
So I know I know all that's been discussed is the Braves are going to trade for Dylan Cease. They're going to trade for King. They're going to add Robert Suarez in there. They're going to add Luis Ariz. I saw someone. I was like, what are we doing here, guys? But in your estimation, if you had to handicap on one of those two getting moved, what would you put it at? One being, no chance other than getting 3 All-Stars in return, and 10 being, Dylan Cease has his bags and he's at the San Diego airport ready to head out.
With AJ Preller, you can never put it at a 1. I'd put it at a 3. Again, both these guys are just so impactful as starting pitchers. The Padres still intend to compete, and trading them away runs directly counter to that intention. The only way this happens is if, again, they're getting 2 starting, caliber position players, or, 1 everyday starting position player, 1 good starting pitcher, and maybe 2 or 3 other, young players who are big league ready. The Padres aren't trading for, A-ball players here. Sort of like we saw the Juan Soto deal. They acquired 3 pitchers with big league experience, and then a 4th piece, a prospect who was in AA and was going to be in the big leagues next year, who they promptly flipped for Dylan Cease. So, I mean, that's what you're talking about here. I mean, Michael King has pitched like an ace since coming over from the Yankees for Juan Soto. So, again, I put it at a 3 for both of them, just because the price is going to be very, very high, and the Padres intend to compete again.
And what positions does San Diego need? I know that's something, I'll see trades come up and it's like, why would team XYZ want this player? They're already set at catcher for a decade, for example, or whatever it is. So what positions, you mentioned probably players closer to the major leagues, if not already in the majors. What is San Diego needing now that we're a couple weeks from pitchers and catchers showing up?
First and foremost, they need a left fielder, someone to replace Jurickson Profar. They don't have a viable major league left fielder right now. And really, they need one other impact bat who can kind of play anywhere, because they have a big hole at DH. So the best possible hitter they can get, whether that's a true DH or someone that, can play a little bit of the infield, and that way you are rotating, Machado in there, Bogarts in there, Cronenworth, Ariz, getting them a day off their feet kind of deal. Just, again, an everyday caliber bat on top of an everyday left fielder. They really need to fill the left field and DH spots. They also need some, starting pitching in the back rotation. Again, a top 3, Yu Darvish, Dylan Cease, Michael King is really, really, really good. Right now, their number 4 and 5 starters are Matt Waldron and Randy Vasquez. I think you feel better if you have those 2 guys competing for a number 5 spot than having both those guys slated to be in your rotation. So at least 1 more back rotation starter. The bullpen's in pretty good shape. And realistically, if you add those 2 impact bats, and those guys who are currently slated to be starters move to the bench, and all of a sudden your bench has been strengthened as well. So the priority really is, a left fielder and then another impact bat, whether that's an everyday DH or someone who allows you to, move other guys in and out of the DH spot. And this is still someone who can play every day.
I can almost hear Braves fans asking through my brain if the Padres would be interested in a slightly used Jared Kelenic. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. It's one of those things. But as soon as you said left field, I almost started laughing inside, because of course that's not what the Braves have to offer in a Dylan Cease trade, except for they just acquired their left fielder in Jurickson Profar. So it's kind of a funny swap. Maybe a Drake Baldwin, because he's a catcher, but he's kind of their best top end prospect guy. But
I can tell you right now, if the offer was Jared Kelenic and Drake Baldwin for Dylan Cease, the Padres laugh and hang up.
And that's what I thought too. Yeah, there's always this dance you can, and Scott got into it too already, where there has to be some pain in a situation like this where it's unique. I mean, you cover the Padres. The Padres are a team that, a lot of these teams that are looking to maybe trade one of their guys closer to free agency are not in the mix. They're not a playoff team, or at least projected playoff team. I think as of today, the Padres are projected to be 4th or 5th in the National League. They're really kind of seeing that in the tier down from the Dodgers are in their own tier, but then you got the Braves and the Mets and the Phillies, and it's kind of the Padres like right there. So they're not going to make a trade that's going to make them a lot worse, it seems like, because why would they? Is that a logical thought process? It's very simple, but to me, it's like, why would they try to get worse? There's no reason for them to get worse.
Again, even with these holes we're talking about, look at the National League. They're one of the 6 best teams in the National League. It's the Dodgers, Phillies, Mets, Braves, Diamondbacks, Padres. Those are the 6 best teams in the National League right now. So again, the Braves would never do this, but what I'm talking about, it would take for Zelentis. We're talking Spencer Schwellenbach. Okay, cease for Schwellenbach, Kelenic, and maybe then you throw in a Drake Baldwin or a great prospect. Like, that's what we're talking. You have to give away someone you really like. That is really good in order to get him. And, from the Padres perspective, it doesn't make sense to trade him unless you get a guy like that. So that's where, again, I would say if a trade comes to happen, the Braves are going to have to give up someone that everyone that is a fan of the Braves would be like, oh, really didn't want to give him up. That's what it's going to cost.
Makes sense to me. Scott, anything else you want to ask Kyle, who's been gracious enough to give us his time on a Sunday evening?
No, nothing in particular, Kyle. Thank you for taking the time. As we said off the jump, Profar, everyone's excited based on everything you said. It seems like he's a really good dude, and sounds like he'll be a good fit in Atlanta. Hopefully it kind of is more of the same from last season. And then we really did want to get kind of an insider's take on the Dylan Cease, Michael King stuff. It seems like by the day, it depends on who you hear from and who you talk to. Some people made it sound like Preller was ready to send either of those guys out the door any second. And then others like yourself make it sound like it's truly we're willing to listen. If you blow my socks off, sure, every player is available for the most part. But so we appreciate the insight and hopefully I'm out here in Arizona, so I'm not far from Southern California. I find myself rooting for the Padres other than when they are whooping the Braves' ass in the first round of the playoffs as they did last year. But that was also like the hospital Braves out there by the end of it. And,
they were limping. That was a Braves team that was certainly not the Braves at their best. That's for sure.
Yeah, would have been a great series if they were healthy, man. Would have been a great series. But and I was rooting for San Diego against LA. I think most of our listeners would agree. But I mean, shoot, I thought if they would have gotten past LA, the Padres might have gone all the way. I mean, that was a special team last year, and that was.
It was. Yeah, I was actually at an event earlier this offseason where Dave Roberts was speaking. He straight up said, they felt like whoever won that NLDS was going to win the World Series, and I think that's a very, very fair assessment. And you know what? The Dodgers took care of business, and they've gotten even better this year. And now it's on the Padres and everyone else to do the best they can to keep pace, Braves included.
That's right. And look, the Braves and Padres open the season against one another in less than 2 months. Perhaps we'll have to do a crossover episode in advance of that series, Kyle. If we can beg you to come back on the show, maybe do a little in-game episode.
I will be out there for opening day. I will be out there for the first 2 games of the series at least, and then won't be there for game 3. It's actually my daughter's birthday that day. But I will be there for opening day that Thursday and then again that Friday. So happy to come on with you guys and discuss the opening series.
That would be awesome. We did it before we brought you in too, but please take a second and tell our listeners, look, people like Scott who don't live in the Southeast, the Braves are let's just say pretty much a national team in some respects. There's fans everywhere, and they might have some secondary interests. Might want to listen to the show, especially when they're playing the Braves, etc. Where can they find your relatively new endeavor in the podcasting space?
Yeah, absolutely. So Friar Territory, it's available on the Foul Territory Network. You can go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Kyle A. Glaser. Currently contributing writer for MLB.com. I think a lot of Braves listeners know me from when I was the lead national writer at Baseball for America for 8 years, covering all the prospects when they come up. Wrote about Acuna and Albies and Riley as they were coming up. Covered their World Series run in 2021, and wrote about Kevin Maiton and Drew Waters too. So wrote about all the guys who worked, all the guys who didn't. You find me on Twitter and Friar Territory at Friar Territory on Twitter as well, and then Foul Territory's YouTube page. We're there. We've got Mike Cameron and Heath Bell, 2 former All-Stars as co-hosts. Obviously talking a lot of Padres, but talking a lot of MLB as well. There's a lot of great, hilarious stories these guys have, and a lot of insight and wisdom to share. So come on over and check us out.
Everyone should definitely be doing that. We just had Ben Badler on the show, speaking of Baseball America, just a few days ago. So it's all also my old co-host, Carlos Colazo, who is there now. used to do baseball show with me. It's a little
Sure,
Baseball
sure.
America mini circle we have going on here.
Yeah, two of my best friends in the industry. I've known Carlos forever, and worked alongside Ben for 8 years. So
There you
definitely
go.
all in
It's
the
a small
family.
world. It's a small world, and one day Scott will make the major leagues, and we'll have Scott's tales from the clubhouse like you have with Heath and Mike. So, no, thank you for being here, Kyle. We definitely appreciate it. People should be checking out Friar Territory. At least subscribe. You don't have to listen to every show, but just smash the download button. Just a little clicking would be just lovely if you want to listen to and support the entire network here at Friar Territory, and follow Kyle on social media, etc. Thanks again, my friend. We definitely appreciate it. As for everybody else, please subscribe to this show. And we'll have more coming up later this week, as we always do. And we'll see you all next time.